Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Joe and I have been going to Stamford Bridge for over 30 years. For the past 3 years, we've been exchanging voice notes on everything from the highs in Porto to the lows of Potter. Each week, this podcast will take you inside our unfiltered thoughts on all things Chelsea, sharing our view from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. Second in the league, top scorers in the league, fourth best defence. Have we got our Chelsea back? In this episode, we look back at a smashing evening on the South Coast as we smashed the Saints 5-1 and look ahead to this Sunday's big game away at Spurs. Let's start with our reaction to that win on Wednesday. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? 5 goals away from home. Let's be honest, it could have been 10. And I'm not even convinced that we played that well. That's the Chelsea that we're looking at the moment. I mean, the lineup, I'd said in the last pod that I thought he would make a few changes. I just thought that he'd rotate a little bit, but I didn't expect 7. And when you looked at the team before the game, we were talking about it on WhatsApp, weren't we, Joe? I think there was a little bit of concern, particularly with my man Disasi. But overall, the players who came in did really, really well, and we'll go through a little bit more on the player performances. But, I mean, how many other teams in the league can make 7 changes to their lineup and put a team out that strong? I'm not sure anyone can. That is the quality that we've got now, and I think is real testament actually to how great it's been, that rotation that we've been able to do, obviously in the cup competitions, to bring those players in, and they're all, match ready, and kind of came straight in and obviously know the way that we're playing, and it felt pretty seamless, didn't it, in terms of those players who came in. Big shout to Jorgensen. He came in, obviously his first Premier League start, and made 2 really good saves. Obviously one at a very important time at 0-0, and then a really good save in the second half. And I think that was a really good sign for him. I was really impressed actually with some of his work with his feet. There was a few times where he dropped a shoulder and looked very, very calm. Maybe, I don't know, you did feel a bit more relaxed after saving the ball at his feet than we have done with Mr. Sanchez. It was interesting after the game, I don't know if people caught this, but in the press conference, the journalist asked Maresca, whether Jorgensen had a chance of playing on Sunday against Spurs, and he immediately said Sanchez would play. He said Sanchez will be starting and 10 other players with him. So he basically very quickly put that to bed, which actually is good management, whether you're a Sanchez fan or not. I think putting that kind of to bed, and it was quite clearly that he just wanted to give him a bit of a break and obviously give Jorgensen some game time, which again, in terms of good squad management, I think is very, very smart. I was so pleased to see Nkunku finally get a first Premier League start since Man City on the opening day, his first 90 minutes in the Premier League of the season as well. And again, I think I've talked about it a little bit in terms of managing him properly. I'm not saying that the way that we're playing, he should be starting every game. I think it's quite clear that we're doing well with the likes of Jackson, obviously Palmer at number 10, but I think he has to manage him a little bit more and give him more minutes. It was good to see against Villa that he got a decent run. He got like 25 plus minutes, didn't he? And then he obviously got the full 90, which was great to see, where he has been getting these kind of token 5 minutes here and then. And I think he showed his real quality. He has to score, but it was a good, calm finish. He didn't doubt him. Palmer cheekily nicked a goal off him, obviously, in the second half. And actually, it was really nice to see Nkunku with a smile on his face. There's a great photo going around Cole Palmer. Apologised on social media saying, sorry Nkunku, I had to do it for my FPL managers out there. And actually, there's Nkunku on the ground with a big smile on his face as kind of Palmer's nicked his goal. And I thought that was really good to see. And we talked about it after the Villa game, but the camaraderie in the group when we're scoring goals is really, really fantastic to see. It was, someone like Sancho getting his first goal, tapping the badge, and all the players over celebrating with him. And again, just these little moments where you look at this group, and it's the stuff that we talked about in the last pod, all of similar age, all a similar kind of profile, and there's just a lot to be pleased about. I was on that man Sancho. It was really good to see him get that goal. It was something I'd said to you, Joe. We didn't put it in the podcast actually, but I was saying that actually the side of his game that we haven't seen yet is how well he strikes the ball. If you look back at some of the goals he scored when he was in Germany, he had a couple of seasons where he scored 20 plus goals over there, and he strikes the ball really, really well. He's got a really great right foot, and it's the part of we just haven't seen that yet. He's been obviously passing really well. His touch has been great, and it was just a really strong finish, wasn't it? Really good, really great. And 5 different goal scorers. You just have that feeling there's whoever plays, there's goals in the team, and there's just when you're bringing players on, you think they're going to fancy themselves. And I think that I saw the stat that Chelsea have already scored more goals this season than we did in that horrendous season where we had obviously Tuchel, Potter and Lampard, where it just felt like we couldn't buy a goal. And we're not even at Christmas yet, and we've already scored more league goals, which is very positive. A couple of final points for me. Really pleased to see Noni step up again. I thought he was fantastic. He obviously got man of the match, which I think was very fair. I was watching it in the pub with Smudge, who will be listening, I'm sure, and we were saying he's that kind of player where you just always feel like he could do so much more. He's so good when he's on it, Madueke. And actually, it's exactly what Maresca said in the press conference after the game when he was asked about him, saying that the reason he'd been out of the game against Villa was that he didn't like the way he'd been training. And he said that Noni, when he's playing well, sometimes sort of takes his foot off the gas, and you just can't do that. And I think it was really good man management from him to do that. And you saw the response today. It was a brilliant finish. His goal right in the side netting, right inside the post. Really, really good goal. And again, he's one of those players where he just really suits the way we play with that direct running style and always looking to get shots and crosses away. Very unselfish with obviously the pass from Nkunku as well. I think Smudge was saying that last season he would have shot there, and you don't doubt it. So really, really positive. And I think I look at him for the future, and with obviously Esteval coming in next season, and I think he is just those two on the right hand side could just be perfect to kind of be in competition with each other and kind of make sure there's not too much pressure on Esteval coming in, who I think will start on the right wing for us in terms of his position. But I'd start the season as we're currently looking with Noni kind of owning that share and Esteval having to kind of try and get it off him and element of rotation, all that kind of stuff. So really, really positive to see that. And the final thing has got to be a shout out for the fans. It's been quite well, I think, publicised today. A couple of the big chants, one of which is the title of this podcast, but we've got our Chelsea back. And how different does that feel to, for example, the end of last season when the away fans in particular really voicing their displeasure at the owners and singing for Abramovich and that kind of thing? Isn't it amazing what a good start to the season can do? And obviously singing for Enzo Maresca as well, which is something that we've been waiting for. We're building something, and it feels a very, very exciting time to be a Chelsea fan.
Oh, absolute great summary there, Chris, of the game. I, like you, was sitting at home watching that thinking we could have got 12. And I know when people say that, you were saying, oh, he's being a bit silly. But if on the face of it, we've hit the post, I don't know how many times, 5. We've hit the bar twice. The goalie made probably half a dozen very good saves in the second half. So, it could have been a very high score. To be fair to Southampton, I actually don't think they're a bad team. I mentioned it in my last voice note about them. I think hopefully people can see what I was trying to get on about. They do attack in numbers. They have a lot of possession. They outdid us in that stake today. They come forward in numbers, and they don't have the personnel. They have good players here and there. They're trying to do the right things. Playing out from the back. I think Jadon Sancho made a point in his after-match interview where he said they were a really tough team, and how they kicked the ball is very impressive. And of course, he's trying to be respectful to a team that have just lost 5-1. But Southampton aren't mugs, and when I look at teams that have gone down previously, they wouldn't necessarily be a type of side that you would expect to go down. So whether the manager can turn it around for them, I'm not too sure. But I think they do deserve a lot of credit for the way they're trying to play. Although I do wish sometimes teams down the bottom, because it was my team down the bottom where we continue to play out from the back and gave goals away. They've given away 9 goals now from errors basically done by themselves, which is a lot in the Premier League. You can't be giving 9 goals away in the Premier League, willy-nilly. So I wish they would change it up now and again. I mean, Kevin Davies was on the Amazon Prime panel. He's someone that, from his own experiences from from teams like Bolton and Southampton when he was there. They would mix it up. Big Sam would get it up there. You'd get players around a big centre forward. Win your knockdowns, win the second balls, get shots away, try and win corners, win free kicks high up so you can bring all the defenders up to try and not a goal in. So I think there's a lot to be said for the way Southampton play, but I think if you're going to stay down there, you need to certainly change your tactics. Maybe just a smidge here and there, but managers are quite stubborn these days. As for Chelsea, it was a very impressive performance without being impressive. I kind of agree with you. I thought we were a little bit complacent in front of goal, particularly at 3-1. I was saying to my son, I said, if they nick a goal here, Southampton, somehow, it's going to, even though they've got 10 men, it's going to feel really bad. And it only takes a penalty or a set piece. And before you know it, it could be 3-3. And the Premier League stings you like that all the time. And I thought we wasted so many opportunities at 3-1 to make it 4, and we didn't. And then that's when Southampton went up the other end. And that save that you're speaking about, Chris Jorgensen, which is an unbelievable save, going the wrong way, stuck his legs out and made a great save. And you think, if that goes to 3-2, it would have felt really bad. But look, overall, the team did play well. But like I say, they were a little bit complacent, maybe a little bit wasteful in front of goal. But my big takeaway, I have to say, was I really enjoyed watching João Felix. I thought he was excellent. Some of the balls he played for Cole Palmer going forward, he was dropping deeper into the hole and clipping these balls. And the weight of his passes is just sublime. I mean, he plays like he's literally in the playground. It's a bit of a cliche, I know, but he doesn't seem to think, he just does. And I love him to pieces. I know he's not everyone's fan's favourite at the moment. I mean, I know he's got a song sung about him, but that came round from the first time he was at the club. But he hasn't had a lot of minutes in the Premier League to sort of showcase his things. And I thought he had a really good game against Leicester. That's a really good game against Southampton last night, although he should have scored with the header. Literally 1 minute into the second half, he heads it wide. I don't know how he headed it wide. That's one thing I would just pull him up on slightly, is his finishing has been a little bit weak at the moment, but hopefully that will come. I thought the fullbacks, Gusto and Cucurella, didn't have their best night, actually. I thought the Southampton wingers, probably got the better of them in the defensive areas. I thought we were struggling a little bit, particularly in the first half. Cucurella got himself together in the second half. When the gap started to open for Gusto in the second half, he also had a much better game. But I did think that was an area we were a little bit weak in last night. And obviously, they're not weak players, I know. I just didn't think they had their best night. But like I say, if that's not your best night, you can still win 5-1, then that's a very good sign. I think, just very briefly, I'd like to touch on Paul Winstanley and Stewart, because there is a lot of hate. There was a lot of disgust and joking going around and slagging off of these guys that have come in with the ownership. Basically said they don't know what they're doing. They haven't got a clue. This player's no good. He doesn't do this. He's too young. You name the excuse why Chelsea weren't performing. And it really frustrates me, because there was nowhere for any of us to get our voices heard by saying that these guys, the players that is as well, they needed time. And when you're buying a player at 18, 19, 20, they are not the finished article. You look at Nicholas Jackson, he's 3 years younger than Drogba was when we signed him. 3 years younger. And he's already doing what Drogba was doing to some degree at this age now. And I just think to myself, these boys needed a chance to be managed properly. That was the big thing. They need to be managed properly by a guy like Maresca, who's been wonderful, by the way. And they needed it all to develop and bed in. And that's why you were hearing Cole Palmer and Sancho last night. Maresca keeps saying, we're not going to win the league title. And I don't think any of us think that. But it really annoyed me that these guys were never given a fair crack. Imagine coming into a job and within 8 months, they're no good, get them out. What do they know? They come from Brighton. Look at Brighton's model. Brighton are 5th in the Premier League behind Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea currently. Brighton are whatever people say about them, they have got it absolutely on the money with their recruitment. And I don't care what anybody says. Anyone who goes out of that club, they seem to replace them fairly quickly for around the 20, 30 million mark, sometimes even cheaper than that. And they're still producing brilliant football, and they're still producing teams that are qualifying for Europe. And that is Brighton. They were a team in Division 3, Division 4, not that long ago, who are now competing at the higher end of the Premier League. So I think people need to get the stick out of your arse and just literally think about what these guys have done, because the players that you were slagging off have turned into being wonderful football players, and they are hopefully going to be wonderful football players in the years to come. So I think they deserve a shout out, along with the ownership, for basically sticking by their guns, sticking to their laurels, and basically saying, no, we are going to do this our way. And, whether you like it or not, come along for the ride and you might enjoy it. And this is what I'm hoping that now that all Chelsea fans across the world are listening in and going, do you know what? I was wrong about that. And actually had the good graces to say you were wrong about it. And yes, Chelsea haven't won a trophy yet. And I know that, but all the building blocks are there. The players they're going to bring in the summer, who knows who's coming in January, maybe nobody. But I think what needs to happen from now on in is that if we do sign a player that isn't maybe someone you're familiar with, or perhaps you don't like that player, they come from a team you don't like or whatever, just let it play out. You could literally go around the whole team. Caicedo was too much money. He's no good. Enzo, he was too much money. He's no good. Sancho, what have we got him for Man United? Oh, he's no good there. Jackson, what have we got him for? He doesn't score any goals. He's a winger. Literally, you can go through the entire team. Cole Palmer, Chelsea have overpaid for Cole Palmer, 40 million. No one knew. But there are metrics to this system where these guys look at a blueprint of players and the stats and the figures. And if they all hit these green markers, that's when Chelsea pull the trigger. And I think it's about time these guys got their credit. So fair play to them. And just lastly, I think Enzo Maresca deserves so much credit, because I don't know how he sleeps at night. Managing this squad of players and keeping them all happy is just beyond me. I don't know how he's doing it. I really don't, because you've got world-class players there like Nkunku and Felix. They just can't get the game. And he's managed to keep them all happy. They all seem to be on side. Yes, I'm sure in the future there'll be some players will leave, but for the short term, he's managing basically two teams of players, and they're all very, very exceptionally highly rated players as well. So fair play to him. He's given us our Chelsea back, and I think that is, what you're hearing last night from the crowd is exactly what I feel when I watch Chelsea. And you know what, win, lose or draw against Spurs at the weekend, it won't dampen my mood. Yeah, I'll be disappointed if we don't win, of course. But do you know what? Bigger picture, I'm looking further than Spurs. I'm looking further down the road. And Enzo Maresca has been absolutely world class from the moment he walked in the door to the moment last night. Love the guy to pieces.
Right, one of our biggest games of the season on Sunday, and we go to Spurs, who have had a really weird season, haven't they? We'll hear a bit more from the big Spurs fan Carl surely about that, but you really don't know what you're going to get playing Spurs, and Chelsea are going to have to be absolutely on it to get a result. The first thing I actually want to say is, before we even talk about Spurs, is I think we're in quite a unique position as Chelsea fans at the moment, where it feels like we can just really enjoy the way we're playing and the fact there is really no pressure. And I was watching the game last night, as I said, in a pub, and you had, obviously it was full of Liverpool fans. It was one of those pubs that was showing all the games. So it's full of Liverpool fans, Arsenal fans, all these guys watching games. And obviously for them, they feel very much in the title race. It felt like every goal was huge, and they were shouting, screaming. And actually for me, we were quite relaxed. Obviously it was a comfortable game, but even if we hadn't won last night, I wasn't worried, because it's like what we kind of, I think, as much as we laughed in the last episode about whether we could go for the title, I don't think any of us do think we are anywhere near that at the moment. And it just actually means we can just probably really enjoy this season, enjoy the fact that we don't have the pressure of huge expectations, enjoying this young team growing in front of our eyes. And actually, if we can get fourth, if you gave me fourth now, I'd take it. That's the position we want to be in. If we can get a comfortable fourth, and we're not still waiting with a couple of games to go, looking at every other team's results around us, wouldn't that be a really nice position to be in? And then we can go to the World Club Cup and enjoy a bit of a summer tournament with Chelsea. So yeah, it's just very, very, I was thinking it's a real nice position to be in as a Chelsea fan at the moment. And I think next season may well be very different, because I think with the one or two key additions in the right positions, next season we may well be in the title race for real. But Spurs on Sunday. So we're going to hear shortly from Carl, who is a huge Spurs fan, a very good friend of mine. And I think that I look at the game, and Carl talks about it a little bit, but I think the wide men for Chelsea will be key in the game. I have a feeling it's going to go for Neto, who obviously was rested in the week, and I think Madueke might get the start, because I think direct runners against Spurs could be massive. We have obviously the benefit of Jackson and Lavia both coming in completely fresh for the game. Jackson, it was funny seeing him warm up with like 10 minutes to go. I was like, there's no way Maresca's risking bringing him on the pitch, one booking away from suspension. So I was like, you might as well sit down, mate, because you're not getting on the pitch. And obviously Lavia will be up against Kulusevski, who's been superb for Spurs, as we'll hear more about. And I think, which is what we said before the Southampton game, most of the other team will probably be what we saw against Villa, with Caicedo going in that weird right back inverted position. In terms of how I feel about the game and expectations, this might sound a little bit negative, but I would take a draw now. And the reason is, I think we're on a really nice run with momentum at the club. I think that we've talked about it, how buoyant we're all feeling. And I just wouldn't really want a defeat to upset that. Hopefully it wouldn't too much anyway. But I think going to a place like Spurs, if we can come away with a point, it's kind of coming away unscathed, isn't it? And then we just carry on with the run of games that we've got going to Christmas. So I don't think a draw would be a bad result at all. And I think probably both teams would be quite happy with that, if I'm being honest. But let's go over to a Spurs fan. Let's hear from Cole. And I asked Cole to begin with to give us a feeling on his perspective on what he's seen from that inconsistent but crazy Spurs season so far this year, and who are the players that we need to kind of watch out for on Sunday. So over to you, Carlo, and thanks again for being part of the show.
Hi, Chris and Joe. Thank you for inviting me onto your excellent podcast. I do appreciate that as a Tottenham fan, I'll probably be about as popular as a rattlesnake in a lucky dip, as my dad would say. But what I'll try and do is offer you a balanced view on what's been a pretty unbalanced season for Tottenham so far. Inconsistency is the word of the day when it comes to Spurs. Indeed, the only thing consistent about us is the inconsistency, and that you really don't know what you're going to get from us from one day to the next. We're currently 8th in the table. That's after Wednesday's games. We're playing Bournemouth tomorrow night when I'm recording this. But 8th probably feels about right, if I'm being honest. As everyone knows, we're struggling to string 2 wins together back to back. We've had some crazy results this season, really. We beat Villa, we beat Man United at Old Trafford. Of course, we beat Man City at the Etihad not that long ago, albeit in the middle of City's poor run, but still 4-0, definitely not to be sniffed at there. But then at the same time, what do we go and do? We lose to Palace to hand them their first win of the season. We embarrassingly lost at home to Ipswich, giving them their first win of the season. We were 2-0 up at Brighton and playing really well, and we completely collapsed in a very kind of Tottenham fashion to lose 3-2. And that's really how the season's gone. It's just unpredictable from one week to the next. And I would say one of the main issues we have is we just don't have any control over the games, really. A lot of it's dictated by how the opposition sets up and how the opposition plays. And that's down to personnel, and tactics, of course, is a big part of that. You know, Ange is a very stubborn guy. But then what modern manager isn't? Like, there's not many modern managers at the top level who are flexible and change things drastically. So that's possibly to be expected. But when you look at the underlying numbers, it actually kind of tells a slightly different story. With a joint third highest scorers in the league, we've got the joint second best defence in the league, along with Arsenal, which is pretty incredible and something that doesn't really get spoken about. You know, we often get described as being very vulnerable defensively, and to an extent we are. But our record shows we've got the joint, second best defensive record. So are we making progress? I don't know. The points would suggest not. The points would suggest we're basically a mid-table team or an upper mid-table team. The underlying numbers kind of suggest that things are going on, that we are making steps forward. But, the proof is in the pudding and the proof is in the results, really. Speaking of Ange, the fan base is broadly behind Ange, although I'd be lying if I didn't say that there's a kind of growing element of the fan base who are getting incredibly frustrated with our inconsistency and especially our home record, I think, not being able to beat a lot of the sides at home. And they are kind of blaming the tactics. And I think there's an element of that, no question. But the wider point really is that Ange isn't just contesting with the opposition and the league and the players. He's contesting with Daniel Levy and ENIC. And unquestionably, he was hampered by the transfer window, where the only starting player we signed was Dom Solanke. Of course, we overpaid for him. £65 million is a hell of a lot of money for Dom Solanke. But don't get me wrong, he's an excellent player. He's been really good this season. He's brought a new element to our team. His pressing is relentless. His hold-up play is outstanding. He hasn't got the goals he deserves, but Even though we overpaid, he's been a good signing. But then beyond that, Timo Werner as an impact sub, he's pretty useless, and I don't need to tell you guys that. The rest of them are kids. Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall, Wilson Odobert. We didn't sign the first team players we were crying out for, and that is the crux of the issue for Ange. And let's be honest, many Tottenham managers over the years. We've got rid of a lot of senior players, Kane, Lloris, and Ndombele, Dyer, Lo Celso, Sanchez. We've slashed the wage bill, over £40 million in the last 18 months, but it hasn't been reinvested in senior, starting, established footballers. And that's where managers will always fall down, because ENIC will never change, unfortunately. They won't pay the top wages. They won't pay out lots of money to help us compete. So that's why things are inconsistent, because we don't have a lot of depth in our squad. We don't have bags of quality, and the tactics are a little bit all over the place at times. Sunday's game, well, it's one of my least favourite fixtures of the season, if not my least favourite fixture of the season, whether that's at home or whether it's at Stamford Bridge. Our record against you guys is just appalling over the years, so I really don't look forward to this one. In terms of our strengths, don't leave space in behind for Johnson and Son, and maybe Werner, if he plays. He might do because of injuries. He's not a great footballer, but he's very, very good at running fast in a straight line, which is what Ange likes. If you leave space in behind, we'll get in, we'll get to the byline, we'll hit those low crosses that Ange absolutely insists on. And he did it at Celtic, and he's doing it now at Spurs. And it's why Brennan Johnson's having the season he is in front of goal. We get to the byline, we get the ball in, and he knows exactly where it's going. It's almost a second nature. So that's a real strength of ours. We play around Dom Solanke, whose hold-up play is exceptional. I've been so impressed with that this season. Again, I know we overpaid for him. He hasn't got the goals that he would have liked, but his all-round play, his pressing, his hold-up is really good. And we bounce off of Solanke if he's fit to play. Because we invert the fullbacks, we can dominate numerically in midfield. But of course, your strength is also your weakness. And those inverted fullbacks mean there's acres of space down the sides, and any team worth their salt will exploit that. It's quite a frustrating thing, especially because actually our regular fullbacks, Porto and Udogie, are very strong when they're out wide. They're very strong touchline hugging fullbacks. But because they're asked to tuck in this system, it leaves us very vulnerable. You can exploit that space on the counter. And equally, if they are in a natural fullback position defensively, neither Porto or Udogie are very good defensively one-on-one. So if you've got people who can carry the ball, and Chelsea definitely do, I'd be looking to isolate those guys and go up against them, take them on, go around the outside in particular. They're poor defending the byline, both Porto and Udogie. That's a real weakness. Set pieces, of course, has been spoken about for Spurs a lot recently. And while we do look shaky on set pieces, particularly Vicario, our record actually is nowhere near as bad as the media would make out, and we haven't conceded that many goals from set pieces. It's actually more crosses in general, I would say, we're weak, particularly when Romero and Van der Ven are in the middle of the defence. Their concentration is poor. They switch off. We're very bad at marking. We lose our men a lot. Not so much on the corner side of things. It's more crosses from open play. And Romero in particular has had a really bad season defensively in terms of concentration, losing his man on crosses. However, you're going to be facing probably a very different prospect on Sunday, because Romero and Van der Ven have been injured. I'd say there's probably a slight, maybe minuscule chance either of them will play, but more likely you're going to be facing Dragusin and Ben Davis, both of whom are very different prospects there. Good at sitting deep. They're good at defending their box, concentration, getting their body in the way. But what they are is poorer footballers, as is Fraser Forster, who'll be in goal because Vicario is injured, a long-term injury. And that means that we'll play out from the back, because Ange insists on it, with people who really can't do it. And that is where Chelsea could really exploit Spurs as well. Pressing high, pressing Davis, pressing Dragusin, waiting for Forster's distribution to go wrong, which it will, inevitably, because he's just not that good a footballer. So that's really where Chelsea could hurt Spurs. Good ball carriers, high pressing, get at the back four, especially down the sides.
Listening to Carlo there speak about Tottenham, I'll be frank, I didn't realise they had quite so many injuries. I would expect that when they start against Chelsea on Sunday, that they're more back to full strength than we all would have imagined. I think they're teams do this, you always think, oh, he's out and he's missing and this guy's not going to play. And then suddenly, before you know it, they're only missing like one player. So Arsenal are great at this. They always say they've got loads of injuries and, suddenly they got Declan Rice is back and Saka's back and this guy's back and Odegaard and whatever. And you think, oh, okay, maybe those injuries weren't quite as bad as we first thought. But yeah, it's a game I don't particularly enjoy in a weird way, because I always feel like if we lose, it would really ruin my afternoon. But I think, like I said in my Southampton note there, I think I'm looking past this result, whatever happens. Okay, say win, lose or draw. I think I'm going to kind of take it as it comes and feel like if the worst was to happen, that we can bounce back pretty quickly. I think the group are now quite hardened. I don't think they're too weak-minded. I think Chelsea team for the last 2 or 3 years, I would have been very concerned if they'd lost a game of this magnitude. But clearly, I'm hoping we're going to go there and pick up the 3 points. And I fully expect Chelsea to make their 7 changes. And you were right, Chris, what you said about the goalkeeper there with Sanchez. You could tell last night, even when players were coming off and the camera panned to the bench, like Sanchez was happy and smiling and giving high fives. And it didn't strike me as someone that's been told you're out, And what it has done, though, it's given the manager a little bit of something to think about, or in a way, if Sanchez does suddenly drop off a cliff and has a bad game against Spurs, he can then sort of justify bringing Jorgensen in for the first team more regularly. So it's just little drip feeding players in, and it just gives those kind of the players that are starting that your place isn't 100%. Guaranteed, which is good, and this is what you want in a team. You want there to be competition, otherwise, what's the point? So I fully expect the team to be basically as it was maybe against Aston Villa, that style of team. Whether Fofana's fit, I'm not sure. So that might be Badiashile and Colwell coming back in for that one. What he does on the wings, I don't think anybody knows. I think he literally must look at every single team, their strengths and weaknesses on the left and the right, and he picks players accordingly, because at the moment you're seeing Madueke will get a start, then it'll be Sancho will get a start, then it's Neto, then it's Mudryk, and then it's somebody else. Then there's always a change and a slight variance in what he's doing. So I'm never going to predict his lineup, because I don't think you can, and say no one would have predicted 7 changes last night. As for Tottenham, again, I always think we can beat them. Our record is magnificent against them. I look at players like Timo Werner, who we had once upon a time when we sung his name, and I watched him play for Spurs, and when he went back to Leipzig. And, he's quite bang average when you look at him. Like Carl says, he literally runs in a straight line very, very well. Other than that, he hasn't got much of a football brain. But, these players are always a threat. If you give them enough chances, they're bound to put one away. So fingers crossed we can keep, those players quiet. Spurs are a bit of a funny old team. So like Carl said, they've beaten some very good sides, and yet they've lost to some very poor sides. And like I've said many, many times, the Premier League can bite you. If you think you're going to be complacent, you will get beaten. So the nice thing about Maresca is I don't think he's got this Chelsea team feeling complacent at any point. They all seem to be on edge, like, am I going to play this week? Or he's took me out this week, or he's bring me back in. And I think that's what's keeping the team exciting as well, because no one quite knows what's going on. Unlike the likes of maybe Caicedo, who plays every single week and should do. And he deserves a mention, actually, from the Southampton game, because he was wonderful. Although Aribo was pulling him everywhere. He was a massive guy, wasn't he? Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough game. It always is a tough game against Spurs. We never really, have, certainly the recent memory, we haven't battered them too much. We do tend to beat them, in fairness, but the games are usually a lot closer than we would all hope. There's been a fair few draws now and again, and I say Spurs' record against us isn't good. But I never take them lightly. I think you can't take them lightly. I'm not a huge fan of Ange Postecoglou. Say his name, Ange Postecoglou. I think he's very stubborn. This sort of media darling that he seems to be, I don't quite get it. The media love someone who just sort of speaks their mind. I suppose there is that to him, but they're speaking your mind, and there's just being stupid, isn't there? Some of these things, when Carl mentioned about not conceding too many golden set pieces, but they have conceded a fair few. And not just this season, last season as well. And he hasn't really adjusted for that. And I think as a manager of any league, I think you need to adjust to where your weaknesses are. They're not going to change. So Chelsea know exactly how they're going to play. So at least that does give us a blueprint of say, well, they're going to play in a particular fashion. And it's then down to Maresca to find the best players at his disposal to go and win the match. I do hope whatever happens at the weekend that the supporters can forgive any kind of bad result if there is one coming. And like I say, look forward to the remaining games coming into Christmas and into the new year, because our run is still very, very good, into January. So if we can get past Spurs with maybe a draw or a victory and keep that momentum going, we've then got Brentford after that, and who knows where we can go into the new year. So I'm very, very confident in a result we can pick up. But like I say, never take Spurs lightly. They can always be dangerous.
Before we go to Joe for his best and worst memories of Spurs away, we're going to go back to Carlo one more time and get his thoughts directly on the game on Sunday and his predictions. So over to you, Carlo. And yeah, hope you enjoy the game, but don't enjoy the result.
In terms of a prediction for Sunday, well, even if we had a full strength squad, I would still probably fancy Chelsea for the win. But when you actually look at all the players we've got missing, I've mentioned a few of them already. Vicario, Van der Ven, Romero, Bentancur, who's suspended because he made racist comments about Son. We've got no Richarlison, who seems to be permanently injured these days. Even our kind of backup players are injured. Wilson Odobert, £30 million to Burnley in the summer. He's only played a few games and he's been injured ever since. Even our kind of wonder kids, Mikey Moore, 17 years old, has burst onto the scene this year a little bit, but he's been out for over a month now with a virus. The kind of small chinks of light that I see, Solanke, I'm hoping will be fit. He should play against Bournemouth tomorrow night. He's been ill. He missed the Fulham game because he was ill. And if he comes through Bournemouth, hopefully that means he's fit enough to play against you guys. And then, like I say, in terms of little bits of light, the form of Dejan Kulusevski, I haven't mentioned him yet, but he's been our best player this season. He's been moved into the middle of the park, and his ball carrying, his strength, his distribution, his crossing into the box. I mean, he really is our most important player. So if he ticks, if he can get on the ball, if he can dominate the game, then we've got a chance. But unfortunately, Chelsea's form is outstanding at the moment. I've just watched you guys dismantle Southampton, 5 goals. You look solid. Maresca looks like he's getting his ideas through. And then on top of everything else, you've got the jewel in the crown, which is obviously Cole Palmer, who, along with Mo Salah, for me, is probably the best player in the league at the moment, those two. So, yeah, again, I'm a pretty pessimistic guy normally, but I hope this is coming from a place of realism rather than pessimism. But if we had everyone available, I could make a case for us getting some sort of result. But your form combined with our lack of form, or our complete up and down form, just means for me, I think Chelsea will have too much quality, and I can only really see a win for Chelsea. I'd snap your hand off for a draw. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But yeah, my prediction is probably for a Chelsea win.
I drew all the luck this week. I saw this in the doc coming up a few weeks ago, and I thought, I think that's going to land on me. So my Tottenham versus Chelsea best and worst. I mean, there's been so many, isn't there? I mean, you could literally pull a number of games out of the hat, and I'm sure there'll be people that will disagree with me or would want to put their own game in. If you've got your own ideas, or you think there was a better game than this one, please email us in or message us on Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you. But for my best game this week, I'm going to go for Tottenham 1, Chelsea 6. It was in 1997. Yes, I'm showing my age. A bit like you last week, Chris. And the reason I remember this game was because my dad and I used to do a football bet every single week. Obviously, he did the betting. I just picked the teams. And I put this one in the doc, and I think he thought at the time this was going to be maybe a dodgy result. But as it turned out, it was the easiest one on the coupon that weekend. So it was a Ruud Gullit game in charge, and Spurs had Christian Gross, and Gross by name and Gross by manager. He was absolutely dreadful. And I also remember the game particularly because Chelsea wore blue and yellow socks. And it always strikes me as mad that sponsors like Nike and things, they never seem to go back to old traditional kits. I think Chelsea always had white socks to a degree, but yellow socks were always quite pivotal back in the day. Remember the blue and yellow socks for the FA Cup final in 1917, the replay. So yeah, all these sort of things. I think, why not change it up every now and again and put something in a little bit quirky? But there you go, Mike. Little idea for you there. the game started pretty evenly, actually, and both sides had some decent shots at goal. Ed Hoy making saves for Chelsea and Ian Walker making some fairly decent saves for Spurs. But the deadlock was broken when a lovely ball from Zola, little dink cross with his left foot over to Andre Flo, the big 6'4" centre forward who was great on the air and great with his feet. Powered little header downward into the low far corner, making it 1-0 to Chelsea. Peter Sinton, remember Peter Sinton for Spurs? God, going back a few years here, I know, but he levelled for the host not far after that, actually, and with a sort of cross from the left-hand side with his right foot. And Ramon Vega, remember him again, another guy, blast from the past. He'd scored a few goals for Spurs leading up to this match, and he scored again, and again at the back post, beating it, heading in for 1-1. So going into the break, it was 1-1, and then coming out in the second half, Chelsea scored 5 unanswered goals, which was just quite incredible. Again, when you're young, it always feels worse somehow. You always sort of worry about every little goal that's scored or every missed chance. You always get a bit nervy. But I think the moment Chelsea went ahead for the second time, you knew there wasn't going to be any comeback from the Spurs. And it didn't take long for Dan Petrescu to sort of dink this ball in from the right-hand side, edge of the box, left-footed, over for Di Matteo, who that sort of goal like Enzo got for us against Leicester last week. A good run into the box, and he headed in. So the third headed goal in the match, 3 out of 3. So making it 2-1 to Chelsea. Then the magnificent Frank Leboeuf picks the ball up by the dugouts on the halfway line and hits his 50-yard raking pass. Absolute wand of a right foot he had. Straight through for Dan Petrescu, who made this run from the right-hand side into the centre, sort of edge of the 18-yard box, just inside, and he volleyed this ball, a little deft volley over Ian Walker, coming out and making it 3-1. It was absolutely beautiful. And not to be outdone, the fantastic Gianfranco Zola thought, well, about time I got involved again. So again, in that little right pocket of the Chelsea forward line, just outside the 18-yard box, Zola picks the ball up and he dinks this ball over the Spurs back four. And it was sort of the only player on the pitch that could play a ball like that in the forward areas. He just absolute magician. Dinks this ball over, and Andre Flo runs onto it from about the 6-yard box, smashes the ball low across Ian Walker into the far corner, and it was absolutely brilliant. So that made it 4-1 to Chelsea, and the goals just didn't stop. Spurs completely on the rack, as you can imagine, 4-1 down at home. The crowd were getting pretty edgy, and new manager Christian Gross wasn't getting the most love, I'm sure, from the home fans. And when Zola picked the ball up outside the 18-yard box in the middle of the goal, he just literally slips this ball in for a young Mark Nichols. Remember Mark Nichols? He looked about 12 in this game. If you go back and have a look, he looks so young. And to be fair, Nichols just rides a tackle and buries the ball low and hard into the left-hand post. It's an absolutely brilliant finish to make it 5-1 to Chelsea. And it really was becoming an absolute rout at this stage. And Ruud Gullit was looking just so happy and chipper. The way he used to. When Chelsea won a good game and Chelsea were playing good football, Ruud always had the biggest smile, and it was obviously infectious to all of us. The final nail in the coffin came when Andre Flo, for his hat-trick goal, he sort of was waltzed into the Spurs penalty area and he dinks his ball again. Ian Walker comes rushing out, not for the first time that day, and Flo just dinks his ball, this lob, disgusting lob, and the ball's it takes an age to come down, and it just dips below the crossbar at the last second, making it 6-1 to Chelsea. And as you can imagine, there was shouts of, "Is there a fire drill?" Because Spurs fans had gone way before this, and it was like no one left in the ground except Chelsea, pretty much. And what an enjoyable day that was. I will never forget it, because it's one of those games it was when Gillette Soccer Saturday was coming around for the first few years, and when Jeff Stelling was in his pomp and Charlie Nicholas, all those guys that were on there back in the day, and me tuning in every week to see who was on and seeing the goals fly in. It's a bit, we've all got used to it now, but back in the day, it really was something to behold. So Chelsea winning 6-1 away to Spurs was absolutely fantastic, and I'll never forget that game. And before I get to my worst Chelsea game, I was going to select the 2-0 Frank Lampard victory when he went there as manager, because that game was so good. It was at the new stadium. Chelsea had like about 5,000 fans there, what it seemed. And, when we went over at the end and Lampard sort of milked it for about 8 to 10 minutes after the final whistle, and they sang his name, all the players were there. It was just like a fantastic, momentous occasion because we had all those young players. But I did decide to go for the 6-1 because I just felt as though it was just a brilliant game of football. But that Lampard one was up there. So for my worst Chelsea game, this is also White Hart Lane, and it came in Jose Mourinho's second stint as manager. And I think just because we didn't see it coming as much as anything, it was just a really bad night for us all round. We actually took the lead. So this is in sort of January 2015, I believe. We took the lead through Diego Costa. It was a ball from Courtois, quick ball out from the back. Hazard doing his thing and crossed the ball. I think it cannoned off the post, or the goalkeeper might have pushed it out. And Oscar basically shoots at goal. And I think it's either just creeping in the far corner or going wide. And Costa makes sure on the goal line and taps it in for 1-0. And then you can tell sort of how long ago it is, because obviously Harry Kane, you can hear the commentators speaking about him like he's a newbie. He obviously scored a few goals probably before this point, but he ends up getting them back on level terms with a good strike inside the far post against Thibaut Courtois, making it 1-1 from just outside the area. Spurs then weren't laying down. They kept coming at us, one after the other. It was a fairly decent game from them, in all honesty. And Chadley, fucking Nacer Chadley, what a pants player he was. But he ends up hitting the post and the ball ricochets out to Danny Rose, who's coming in from left back. I don't know why he's up there quite so high, but he was. And he just basically smashed it in from the 6-yard box to make it 2-1. For the third, Ivanovic upends Kane in the box, just inside the box, and it was a penalty. And again, going back in time, Aaron Lennon stepped up and took the penalty, not Harry Kane, and Lennon buried it into the far corner, making it 3-1 to Spurs. And God, we were in all sorts of trouble. Into the second half, Spurs again kept coming. The ball gets passed into Harry Kane on the edge of the box, and sort of similar fashion to the goal he scored against Arsenal those years ago, a bit later in his career, I should say, where he sort of received it on the half turn and he just basically buried it, not as high against Arsenal on this occasion, sort of low past Courtois to make it 4-1 to Spurs. And I think we're all just feeling the worst, aren't we? We're just going, oh my God, let this game end. But we had to carry on. I think we'd have waved the white flag at that point. But we did get back into it, and we broke in numbers. And it was Oscar, Fabregas, Hazard. When you look at listen to the team, it's absolutely insane, isn't it? The thing is Oscar to Fabregas to Hazard, and Hazard buried it in the far corner to make it 4-2. And you're thinking, is there, there was still time, obviously, to make it a game of it. If we could get the next goal, I think, like in all these games, if we can get the next goal, Spurs had that sort of feeling of they could crumble at any point. Didn't matter if they were playing well or not, but they didn't. And it was actually Nacer Chadley again who got the fifth for them with a smart shot, kind of whipped in again past Courtois to make it 5-2 to the hosts. And you're thinking, okay, that's probably our lot. And up until, again, a bit of a scrappy move, we went down the right-hand side of the Spurs penalty area, and Hazard cuts his ball back, and there's about, I think Ivanovic goes to shoot, Oscar goes to shoot, and they both miss kick it. And then John Terry, again, why he's up there, who knows? But he's obviously just thought to himself, fuck it, we're 5-2 down, let's try and score a goal. And he, a bit like Danny Rose, just thumped it in to make it 5-3 near the end. And I think, like I say, we were still top of the table, I think, on alphabetical order after this game from Man City. So a bit like Arsenal are ahead of us at the moment on alphabetical order, or certainly before the Southampton game they were. And yeah, it was one of those things where you just thought, you got to wipe it down and carry on. And we did go on to win the league that year, so it wasn't all bad. But that was certainly a pretty shameful night for the Blues. But I've got to say, to add in at the end here, if you try and look at any Spurs-Chelsea games, it's quite remarkable how many times they've won. It's literally, you can count on, one hand, and you still have change how many times Spurs have beaten Chelsea over the last 30 or 40 years. It's quite incredible, really, the run we have against them. So let's hope we can keep that going with a victory, or certainly not a loss, when we play them this week.
Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be all right.